folks always want a seat at the table, and when I hear people say like I want a seat at the table, or they're not giving me the seat at the table, I think you have to like look at yourself and say like, well, first, are you adding value to these conversations? Because when you're adding value and you're killing the things that you're doing, people want you to be sitting at their table. And then when you get to the table, then you're like, I have the right to sort of get into anything I want. And you got to be respectful, of course. You don't want to just like, you're a finance person, by the way. You haven't sold software yet, but when you can step into some of those areas, you can add a different perspective. And I think that's what's really valuable, is when you can come with a different perspective, and then everybody can make better decisions.
Is this thing on?
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
Why, thank you, Fat Joe, and welcome to Run the Numbers, where I interview world-class CFOs, operators, and the investors who fund them on how to get the most out of your company's performance. This podcast is a playbook of sorts for ambitious people in the worlds of finance, strategy, and operations. Today, my guest is Ante, the CFO of publicly traded payroll provider Paycor. Adam took Paycor public in his first 2 years of his very first CFO gig. Wow. On this episode, we cover combating imposter syndrome as a leader and aggressively stepping into your fear, the cool story about pricing Paycor's IPO share price, how payroll companies have unique insights into the economy's underlying health, and why we need to remember that the whole world is not tech or necessarily endemic of what's going on across the economy, advice on asking a mentor or someone ahead of you for advice, very meta, training your capacity for stress, why the small things are really the big things, and pieces of advice CFOs have given him over the years. Adam is both one of the most accomplished and simultaneously vulnerable CFOs we've spoken to. He's been really successful in a fast time, but is really honest about the stuff he's messed up in the past and hard feedback he's received from others. This is a masterclass in how to climb up the ranks while also maintaining humility and imparting knowledge to others on the rise. All this and much, much more after a short word from our sponsors. Cash is king. As the CFO of a SaaS company, I know firsthand how important it is to maintain a healthy AR balance. If you can't effectively manage cash, you can't service debt, make payroll, or invest in growing your business. That's why I'm so excited to partner with the sponsor of today's episode, Maxio, the leading billing and financial operations platform for B2B SaaS. Maxio helps top SaaS companies like Chili Piper, Crunchbase, and Stack Overflow get cash in the door faster by automating collections and dunning. Gone are the days of manually chasing down invoices. Join the 2,500 plus subscription businesses using Maxio, formerly SaaS Optics and Chargeify, to eliminate revenue leakage and streamline order to cash. It's never been easier to get paid. Visit maxio.com/run the numbers to supercharge your financial operations in 2024. Not only does requesting a demo using the Run the Numbers link help support this podcast, ya boy, you also receive a 10% discount on your first year with Maxio. Woo! That's maxio.com/run the numbers. That's maxio.com/run the numbers. Okay, serious question for all my accounting pros here today. Are you doing what you were hired to do? What I mean is, do you have time to actually be a business partner, or are you buried in tedious manual tasks just to get your journal entries prepared every month? I know how that feels. Leapfin's here to help with that. Leapfin is accounting automation software that automatically prepares and posts reliable journal entries. And that's just the beginning. High-growth businesses like Reddit, Canva, and SeatGeek choose Leapfin to eliminate manual tasks, accelerate month-end close, and enable accounting leaders like you to provide faster insights that will help your company grow. If you're battling messy transaction data from Stripe, Adyen, Shopify, Apple Pay, and other PSPs, and then battling again to get it all into Netsuite, go to leapfin.com to watch their short product intro video. And if you like what you see, request a 15-minute conversation to learn how accounting automation can help you and your team. Check out leapfin.com today. That's leap like jump, fin like shark. I just made that up. I hope they're okay with it. Leapfin.com. Adam, thanks for joining me on the Run the Numbers podcast today.
CJ, it's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Right after this, I have 4 toddlers, so 4 kids under 3 years old, coming to my house for a pizza party. So I may have to keep you on this podcast a little bit longer so I can delay the inevitable chaos.
I would say that sounds like a nightmare, but there's like 8 10-year-old boys in my backyard right now for one of my son's birthdays.
All right, so you're outdoing me.
But under 3, that is significantly worse. That sounds like a nightmare.
I'm excited to talk all things CFO with you today. I was going through your resume, and it's really not often that someone gets to take a company public in their first 2 years of their first CFO gig, like really impressive. And you rose up the ranks super fast at Paycor. Can you talk a little bit about joining and then navigating leadership turnover and kind of how you got to where you were within the org?
Yeah, absolutely. When I came over to Paycor, I was hoping that it would be an opportunity to be able to become the CFO, and I felt like I had a lot to learn. So I was excited to work with the CFO at the time. But just a couple months into my gig, he called me and he was like, "Hey, I'm out. I quit." And I was like, "Oh man, what did I do?" I had a really good job previously, and when I came over, I hadn't seen that level of leadership turnover. So I was pretty anxious. But we brought in another CFO actually, and he was great. And then we ended up doing a private equity deal with a firm called Apex, who still owns a big chunk of our company. And the CFO at the time, he left to go be the CEO of another software company, and it put me in this opportunity to potentially be the CFO. And again, it did happen a lot faster than what I had anticipated. So, I mean, one, just to have the opportunity, you never know if it's really going to work out with the company that you're at, and you sort of have to navigate and keep pushing and put yourself into opportunities with companies that maybe you really enjoy and have this opportunity to be the CFO. And it just all happened a little bit faster than what I was anticipating. So it was cool. And then the chance to take the company public, the market's got to line up. The market opportunity has to be there, and things just really came together. Paycor has been in Cincinnati for 30 years, and they had wanted to take the company public for like 15 years, and they had been talking about it for a long time. So for us to be able to come in and for it to sort of all line up, it was really exciting to be a part of it and to bring the team together to be able to do the IPO in July of 21.
It sounds cliche, but they say preparation meets opportunity. And I think a lot of people, depending on like what your mindset was at the time, you may be like, oh shit, like maybe I should bounce too, or like I should look for something different. But it's kind of like you saw the way that the cards were lining up or the playing field was kind of assembled. And you said, no, this is actually an opportunity. It's one of those things where it looks scary, but that actually is the opportunity in and of itself.
I mean, you're totally right. Like having the sort of fortitude of the discipline to sort of deal with some of those pains, because it's definitely hard. It's hard. And it's almost always hard. But when you have leaders that leave, it's easy to ask like, man, maybe this place is falling apart, and maybe I should go. And we saw a lot of people that did leave at the time. But being able to say, hey, I see the opportunity. I really love the industry. I really love the market and where it's going. Yeah. I love the product, and the people are great to work with. And so some of those things just came together, and we said, and I said, no, I really want to give this a chance. And then hitting it off with the CEO was a really big deal as well. We connected pretty quickly, and I was like, okay, this is great. I think I'm going to be able to work with this guy. If only he'll give me a chance to do it. So yeah, you got to sort of push through if all those other things are really lining up.
So I'm a Patriots fan, and I was watching this documentary that came out on Apple about Tom Brady and the Patriots. And there's this famous story that Brady goes down to Kraft's office, guy barely knows him, and he says, hey, Mr. Kraft, I'm Tom Brady, and I'm the best decision you ever made. And I was reading through or listening to a podcast that you were on. Is it true that you went to your CEO and you were like, hey, man, give me a shot?
Yeah. I guess it happened like that. Not quite Tom Brady level, but yeah, so I had been like the deputy CFO at this point for maybe 6 months, and I had interviewed a couple of my potential new bosses as CFOs, and they didn't work out, not because of me, but they just decided that they didn't want to take the opportunity. So I was the deputy CFO when the new CEO joined, and we started working together for a couple months, and we were still looking for folks, and the private equity team, they really wanted somebody who had clearly taken a company public before. It's a great experience, right? Yeah. So they wanted somebody that had done that, and they weren't interested in the time. And in one of their larger investments is bringing in a new CFO or a first-time CFO. But I had been working now with the company for like 3 years, been working with the private equity team for a while. And I went to the CEO and I said, look, you're going to bring in a new CFO, and it's going to like the work is going to fall on me and my team and my back. Because I was running FP&A and analytics at the time. I was like, it's going to fall on me. And why don't you just give me a shot to do it? Why don't you just give me the chance? And it was a little bit of a departure from how I had stepped into the role, because I was just anxious as this sort of first time CFO working with this private equity firm. I was like, yeah, maybe I'm not ready. But then I did it for like 6 months, and I was like, okay, fine. Either fire me or give me the chance, so to speak. And the CEO, he really appreciated that. He was like, yeah, like let's do it. So he had my back and went to the private equity firm, and they ended up hiring me. It was very fortunate that it worked out like that.
I love stories like that. And I'd imagine though there still is a bit of an imposter syndrome once you do get in the seat. Would that be right?
Yeah, there's like chasing after the role and getting the role, and then you catch it and you're like, what did I just bite off here? What did I get into? And man, for the first little while, I remember feeling, not just a little while, for a while actually, I remember feeling like somebody was going to come into my office at any moment and just be like, what the hell are you doing here? You're not allowed to be here. Why did they let you into this role? And they're just like, get the hell out of here. So the first like 6 months actually were right before COVID hit, and it was really tough. And then when COVID hit, it was like, there was this feeling initially of like, oh my gosh, can I really lead the organization through this tough time? It's going to be really rough. But it actually helped really solidify it for me, just really having to step in. There's nobody else. So you're like, okay, let's start stepping in. And eventually that imposter syndrome went away. But, I think that it's something that a lot of folks deal with, and it definitely hit me right out of the gate.
I think what's helped me get over the imposter syndrome is action. It's like when I get in my head and I'm not doing like what needs to be done. I distinctly remember this moment in the first couple months of my first CFO role. I'm in my second year now, but we're in the auto industry, and we were negotiating with like a Fortune 100 publicly traded auto supplier. Mm-hmm. And I was like 3 months into the role, and I was like, if someone who knows me like opened up the door right now, they'd be like, sir, like, how did you end up in this meeting, and do you have any idea what you're doing? But like after you get a couple of those under your belt, you're like, okay, I think I can hold my own here.
Yeah, you're totally right. You're totally right. Just like keeping going is so important. There's this former Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink. He's a huge personality. He says like when fear takes, or when you get scared, like just step into it, be aggressive. And, that's the aggressive side of it. Like, you just got to keep going. You got to just take another step, keep pressing in. And you're right. And eventually you're like, oh, now I have a little bit of experience. And that sort of being scared doesn't happen as much.
I was reading this book that talked about Amelia Earhart and how she would get scared when she was flying. And she had this saying, like, always think with your stick forward, like never let the plane like lose altitude. And I kind of think about that, like with myself, like keep up a velocity of like getting stuff done that like you don't like sit on it for too long. But maybe that's just me and I'm a head case.
No, I love it. Yeah. You got to sort of get out of your own head, right?
I want to zoom in on a period of time. And so we mentioned that you took Paycor public in July of 2021. Can you tell the story about pricing that deal?
Yeah, that was fun. So the pricing in this case, happens all the way at the end, right? Like right when you're about to take the company public, and we go through the roadshow for the prior maybe 4 or 5 days. It was all virtual, the roadshow. After the virtual roadshow, we go to New York City and we're going to price the deal. And it's me and the CEO. And then we have like folks from our team are going to show up as well. But me and the CEO are there, and we go to NASDAQ, and we end up in a small conference room to formally price the deal. We have our private equity partners are there. We have some of our bankers from a couple of the banks that were the co-leads. And then we had our audit committee on, who was going to help price the deal. And I'm sitting in this room thinking like, how the hell did I get into this room with these people? It's a little bit of that imposter. So I'm like, oh my gosh, how are they letting me into this room in the first place? And, you're going through, you're listening to the capital markets team read back how all the investors are going. Like they're saying, hey, I got this person at 22. And if you go up a little bit more, it's like 23, and they won't buy at 24. And so they're reading off their list. And we had just come off all these conversations with all these investors. So it was cool to see, to hear the feedback, where they're going to buy, how many shares they're willing to buy. And you start to see the book build. So it's just exciting. And then we end up like the partner ultimately is going to make the call on the price that we're going to launch at. And you're sort of conversating between 22, 23, do we go to 24? And ultimately we launched at 23, but he's like, hey, everybody, it sounds like it's 22. And he's like, anybody, Adam, what do you think? And I was like, well, 23, it's another, in this case, it was like another $20+ million, and this is cash. It's all in the primary. So it's going to the company, and we're investing it back into the company. And I was like, I think it sounds like we can do 23. And he's like, okay, great. Let's go with 23. And I was like, that's it? Like there's nothing else? You're gonna let me just like be like, yeah, let's do 23. And it's like that
That's
little bit of
awesome.
imposter syndrome where you're like, somebody is gonna come in here and be like, "Wait, did you just listen to him? Like, get him out of this room." But it was a lot of fun. It was a cool culmination of like the entire IPO and coming to this moment, and you're sitting in this room and you're like pricing a $500 million deal. It was cool. It was a little crazy too.
That's awesome. You get that feeling like, is anybody going to check my work on this?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to dig into how Paycor makes money. Adam, can you walk me through the different revenue lines that you forecast for?
Yeah, certainly. So Paycor is an HCM platform, SaaS platform, and we do, there's a lot of payroll, HR, talent, performance management like solutions. And we do, a lot of sort of like payroll services that wrap around that. But the way that we go to market is through a direct sales force. And we just launched a new embedded channel that goes to market through software providers. The way that we end up pricing our software is on a per employee per month basis. So, it was sort of a little bit more of a traditional SaaS model today. Hasn't always been the case in payroll, but we charge on a per employee basis. And we have just over 2.5 million employees on our platform, using our platform between payroll and HR and talent performance management. And when we look at, the various revenue streams, of course, we break it into, the various products that we end up selling, but, they're bundled and you sort of are looking at allocations. So we forecast it down to, that level, but then a monthly recurring revenue number. And then there's a couple other components that we would, that we sort of lump into what ultimately becomes, like form filings, W-2s. When you get your W-2 annually, we print those and ship those to you. And we look at those at an individual level. Or a couple of the things that we do is we like to triangulate our forecast. So you might do a really detailed unit metric forecast within your portfolio. How many people do we have on the platform? What are all of the pieces of revenue that they're buying? And what are we charging them, et cetera? And then you might look at it like employee segments and say, well, what employee sizes? So like small market companies, mid-market, lower enterprise, large enterprise customers, and segment it that way. And then do another segmentation with various product streams of like explicitly how we bill, which doesn't show up in the revenue GL the same exact way. So we have a couple of different models that we use to sort of triangulate it all together when we're forecasting. It hasn't always been the case that we've been super tight, but for the last 4 or 5 years, that model, as we've continued to shift our pricing strategy, we continue to shift more and more up market. You really have to get down to a pretty granular level of forecasting.
Hey, thanks for listening. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Mercury knows your financial operations are complex. Founders and finance teams have to pull together different tools, reconcile transactions from different sources, and struggle to get accurate answers. With Mercury, you can simplify your operations with banking and software that power your critical financial workflows, all within the one thing every business needs, a bank account. And with new bill pay and accounting capabilities, you can pay bills faster, stay in control of company spend, and speed up reconciliation. Apply in minutes at Mercury.com and join over 200,000, ambitious startups that trust Mercury to provide the precision, control, and focus they need to transform their financial workflows so they can perform at their best. Mercury, the art of simplified finances. Mercury is a financial technology company, not a bank. Banking services provided by Choice Financial Group and Evolve Bank and Trust. Members FDIC. I'm getting good at that voice. Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. That's the goal, isn't it? But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. Yesterday's price is not today's price. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to Netsuite by Oracle. Netsuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform and one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required. Access from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems because you've got one unified business management suite. You improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 companies, that's a lot of customers, have already made the move. So do the math. See how you'll profit with NetSuite. And back by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/metrics. That is netsuite.com/metrics. Ooh, yeah, your boy loves some metrics. That's netsuite.com/metrics. Please do it, guys. I really need this. So would it be fair to say that the employee is kind of the atomic unit that it starts with?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the level. It's like our user. It's like, a Netflix hours for us is like the employee on the platform. Yeah.
Is that a North Star metric for you at Paycor? A number of users or number of employees?
Yeah, you're exactly right. That's how we think about it. It's the number of employees and our product suite. So we think about those two things. Like we think about expanding our platform or adding employees to our platform and expanding our product suite. So it's really those two things. And the North Star, it has to be the employees. The product can be great. Nobody could be buying it. So, have a great product. But then how many employees you put on the platform. Yep.
Yeah. And it's kind of like a lot of good stuff can happen the more employees you have on the platform, because you can attach different modules or different products to it over time.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been a bit of our strategy, is continuing to expand that product suite. It enables more cross-sale. It enables more adoption. We've seen that, over the last really 5 years, that we've more than doubled the suite that we have, our product suite, and really built it out in that mid-market and the lower enterprise market. And it's enabled us to continue to grow the portfolio pretty dramatically over the last, 4 or 5 years.
Adam, what I find really fascinating about the HCM market is like payroll is core to every company. Like it's like the lifeblood. So it's like a control point. If you don't have payroll and you're not paying people, they're not going to show up and work and do anything. So I imagine it gives you like some unique opportunities to expand over time. Maybe you could just tell us a bit about how the HCM market has evolved, like since you've been there, and some of the changes you've seen.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's one of the best things about the moat of payroll is that everybody has to have it, and it's complex. As much as we might want one party to win in the government, it doesn't really matter. More complexity, more regulation, more compliance has been the case for a long time, and you have more state and local legislation and oversight that's driving more complexity down to the individual level. And then you add to that like the virtual the virtual nature of work. I'm sitting here in my home office right outside of Cincinnati, and a lot of folks have done that. And so that has created even more complexity for paying payroll taxes. So that's one of the great moats, I think, around payroll generally. And it's why you see there's actually not a lot of new small companies that have been able to get into the space and scale and get to any meaningful level of scale. So that's a moat for us. Over the last 5 to 7 years since I've been in the space, the HCM market has continued to expand around other products as well. Like it gets deeper into the payroll and compliance, but is also expanded out now to include more talent and performance management. So the way that when I was sort of growing up, we would do our performance management in a Word document. It would be saved online, and you'd get your sort of questions and how you're doing all sitting in a Word document online. And then it evolved to effectively the Word document, but inside of a system online. And now the performance management enables, and the tool that we have, it enables, regular one-on-ones, and you can build your one-on-ones right in. You can build OKRs right into the tool that then go right into your performance reviews. And you can tie that back to the OKRs that you did over the last year. So there's just so much more integrated into that talent performance management suite. That's been a really cool part of software to see expand.
Maybe an odd question, but is payroll's real ideal customer profile, or I guess the decision maker, is that the chief people officer or is that the chief financial officer? Because it kind of touches both.
It does touch both. And I think that we see that payroll sits sometimes in finance and sometimes in HR. The talent management decision almost always sits within the HR and with the CHRO. So it sort of depends on the size of the company that you're in. If you're in a smaller organization, say under 100 employees, maybe under 200 employees, you get a lot more of the CEO wanting to make the decision. A senior finance leader or the CFO is definitely in there, and you might have a CHRO or an HR leader, or you'll definitely have an HR leader, but maybe not a CHRO. So it sort of depends on the level of the organization. When you get much larger, the CFO is always a decision point. They may or may not be down to that level of detail within the payroll to really drive it, but they end up in the decision at some point.
That's exactly what we went through recently. Like I was budgeting out how much it would cost and how much payroll was flowing through it. But I have to admit what you said about it being complicated as a moat. When it got to that level, I was like, guys, I'm tapping out here. You got to tell me what's good.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you get into such specific pieces of functionality and requests. It gets complicated quickly.
What would you say Paycor's competitive moat is?
Well, I think those two dynamics of, the complexity of payroll really do, and of course others have that same benefit, that moat at levels of scale, and we have competitors who are much larger than us as well. They have that benefit. But I think the biggest opportunity for us is really on that talent side. We've been able to build out a really deep talent suite, and that ability to get into performance management, talent attraction as well. So on the front side of that, how do you find and recruit employees, and then how do you keep them? Over the last 4 years, this has been one of the biggest pain points. We've expected the labor market to collapse in a sense, and it never has, or at least not yet. It hasn't in the last 4 years post-COVID. It's been as tight as it's ever been. And I think people are putting a premium on, hey, I need to find talent. Where can I find talent? I need to find the best. And then when I get them, I need to keep them. How do I retain these people? So building into the performance management culture has been a big part of our investment thesis.
Not to play, armchair economist here. I was actually talking to Kyla Scanlon, who writes a lot about the economy, and she was like, CJ, I got to remind you that most companies in America are not tech companies. So sometimes I'll overstate the amount that tech is within the economy, because you see layoffs here, layoffs there. But I think, as you were saying, Adam, the unemployment rates have actually been pretty strong over the last 2 years.
No doubt. I mean, so we see this across our portfolio. It looks much like the broader U.S. economy, right? And so 14% of the employees on our platform and the companies are in restaurant and food and beverage. And that's been really strong. We've seen it sort of pull back a little bit as of late, but you remember post-COVID, you could never find anybody at a restaurant. And so they've just been looking for talent for a long time. Healthcare has continued to grow. Manufacturing is a little bit more sluggish now, but those are big chunks of the economy. And when the headlines hit that Meta's doing something or the Magnificent Seven are doing something, those are great. I mean, they're important headlines and indicators of what's going on, but they're really not endemic of what's happening across the entire economy for sure.
I nerd out on this stuff, but you being the CFO of a payroll company, you actually probably have a pretty good view of finger on the economy's pulse to a certain degree, because you can see how many people are getting paid.
We build what we call our same-store sales growth, and it's non-farm payroll growth, right? We look at the non-farm payroll and we track that against our portfolio of what do our companies doing? Are they growing or not? And it's so cool to see, because I'll nerd out on it too. Our team will put together these really cool views, and they're look out, it tracks almost exactly. And then when you see it disconnect, we've seen it disconnect a little bit from the broader, macro economy and the non-farm payroll number. And we were expecting revisions. We were we think that the non-farm payroll number is going to get revised downward. And then lo and behold, a couple months later, it got revised downward pretty well, back in the December, January, February timeframe. And I think we don't have as much government as what shows up in the non-farm payroll number. So, we see a slightly different dynamic. It's pretty cool to be able to see it though. And we track it by day to see how those companies in the portfolio are performing at the front lines like that.
That's awesome. You got to follow the money, baby. That's where it is.
That's where it is. Yeah, that's right. Everybody's trying to figure it out.
You made major leaps in your career at a relatively young age. And so I imagine people have asked you for advice, saying how do I copy what you did? And it's kind of a meta question here, Adam, but do you have any advice for asking for advice or feedback?
Yeah, man, you got to be careful when you ask for advice, I guess. My CEO always actually tells me, hey, be careful for asking them, because then you're going to have to listen to what they say. And you're it's actually a good perspective. And it made me think about some of the times that maybe some of those questions have frustrated me on, mentoring, or questions that folks might have asked about their career. And, I don't always have the greatest career advice. I just can offer up hey, this is my perspective. This is what happened to me. And I love it / hate it when people are that doesn't really make sense. I don't think that works. And you're oh, okay, great. Why did you ask me then? I guess I would caution people, or no, encourage people. I would encourage people ask people for advice, but just, you're going to have to consider it. You should be considerate of the advice that you ask for people. Maybe that'd be the way I'd say it. That's
good. It's when my wife is what do you want for dinner? Chinese food or pizza? And I'm pizza. She's all right, I think we're going to get Chinese food.
Yeah. You're I was fine with it. Just Don't ask me about it. Yeah.
Either take my opinion or don't if you ask for it. Has any advice other CFOs you've worked underneath stuck with you over the years? Any basic, pieces of information that you come back to often?
Yeah, I there's a couple actually. Maybe it's a little bit funny, the advice that have stuck with me. But there was this one. I had just launched off of M&A, and I was running like a small finance team, and I was trying to like integrate this business. And so I was working for the CFO. He was running this business that we just acquired. So I hadn't really worked with him for too long. And I was trying to compile some deck. It was probably for like planning purposes or something. And I think it was probably getting a little thick in schedules, is my guess, if I'm recalling it appropriately. Like just too many schedules and like just a litany of things in there and just probably lots of data points. And he was like, okay, stop. He said, your presentations need three things. They need a title, a page number, and a takeaway. It always stuck with me. I was like, oh, okay. He just was very frustrated with, how I was bringing things together, but it stuck with me, and it made me, I still give this feedback to others, and I still keep this in mind because like the takeaway is so important. And if you are just throwing stuff on pages, to talk to folks, and they don't know what the takeaway is, they don't know what you're trying to tell them, then it leaves everybody sort of just bewildered, and it's like a waste of time. So that was a pretty fun piece of feedback that always stuck with me for some reason.
On that one, Adam, like it totally resonates because I remember certain times in my career I would get up in front of people and I would just like try to blind them with my science. I just like throw numbers at them left and right and center. And I remember I gave a presentation and I was like, I'm hot shit. And then like I paused and I waited. And I think it was like the CFO, he said to me like, I didn't ask for data. I asked for analysis. And I was like, wow, I just totally fell on my face there. That didn't hit at all.
That's a good saying. I like that. Yeah. It's tough. You got to bring all the insights. It's not just the data. It's interesting because we're in like such a great position, right, in finance to have all the data. And, especially when you start off, you're just like trying to compile all this stuff and you're trying to figure all the data out. You want to like show it off a little bit. So you got to be careful, right? Because not everybody can consume it. It scares a lot of people too when you like flash lots of data up anyway, and they just like, they go blind. So like really focusing on what they care about is real important.
And like doing the small stuff actually matters. Like what you said about putting a page number. I remember when I was in consulting before, like I went over to the operator side, I had this boss named Dasha, and she like had written on a slide I'd made, like, this is a different shade of green. And I think I said back to her, like flippantly, like, does it really matter? Like, it's pretty close. And she's like, no, you don't get it. Like, this is the only thing we sell right here. Like, we don't have other widgets. There's no other product. So like, if you can't get this right, then I can't give you anything else. And it kind of hit me like the little things are the big things in order for her to trust me with like something more significant.
That is so true. And I hate to always like poke on format and formatting and stuff. But you're absolutely right. It's like when the team doesn't have the attention to detail to make sure that you're always using the same font and your dollar signs are always either like tight or apart, but like that everything is consistent, then it just draws into question, like, did you spend the right amount of time on the back end of this analysis? Did you talk to the right people to get this thing together? And that is like the worst thing that you could do, right, for your analysis is create questions around, do you really know what you're talking about? Did you really put in the effort? Is it broken behind the scenes?
It's so true. I remember this other time. Now I'm like thinking about all the times I've messed up formatting, but like it actually was, it was like a microcosm of something bigger. I worked for this guy, Austin, who's like one of the smartest strategy guys I ever worked for. And I remember he called me in his office. He's like, hey, I have a correction for you. And he starts like flipping between two slides, like back and forth really quickly. And I'm like, what is it? Did I spell something wrong? Or like, is there a color off? And he's like, no, look at the header. I was like, what about it? He's like, it jumps from page to page. I was like, seriously? Like, he's like, yeah. Can you go back and fix that? And he's like, well, if you took 3 minutes to go through and change these things, like that 10% like separates you from the rest of the people who are putting in like just as much thought into it. And I was like, okay, if you're giving me like a wedge to differentiate myself, I'll be the guy who goes and checks if the headers jump on the paper. But like, that was like the level of inside baseball that I felt like there's somebody else who's checking those things. And so if he cares that much, I need to step it up and actually care.
That's a great insight. Absolutely.
Any other pieces of advice CFOs have given you that have stuck with you over the years?
Yeah, there's one that I don't love to share, but maybe it's perfect for this, your podcast. We were doing something similar. Like I was going through a plan review with the CFO and the CEO in this case. And we had come in the morning, we being me and my team had come in. I had a couple guys that were printing off the pages, right? This is when we used to print everything. This is a long time ago at this point. But printing off the whole deck, and they were stapling it, and something was wrong with the presentation. We had to go back and make a quick change. And of course, when you have to go do that and print it all off, it takes forever. And so we ended up coming into the office like 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late. And it's with the CEO and the CFO. And afterwards, we go through the presentation and everything was fine. And afterwards, the CFO, grabs me as we're walking back to our office, and he's like, "Don't ever make me fucking wait again for you." And I was like, oh my God, I was hot. Like I felt my blood like rush to my face.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we're going to fight. We're going to throw down right here. I was like, okay, and I understand. And the thing I took back from that after cooling down and reflecting on it a bit was, look, if you're not going to be prepared and you're not ready to talk to the CFO and the CEO and everything's last minute, like you didn't check this stuff beforehand, that was my fault. And I needed to have gone through it appropriately with the team and put the right diligence in. And yeah, you can't make people wait for you. It's not cool. I'm not always great at it still, but I try to be as punctual as I can now.
Yeah, I've grown to appreciate that over time, like just showing up on time and just showing up every day is half the battle. And then being consistent and being reliable, like it's part of your brand over time.
Absolutely is. You're right. You're totally right. That's a really good way to say it. It's part of your brand. Because you could just like show up to meetings and bomb on people all the time, and then they won't trust you, they won't include you and stuff. So,
Adam, do you think finance people pigeonhole themselves into narrow roles? Are there examples of like jumping into places that you didn't belong in your career that actually paid off?
I think finance people do that in spades. They're so good at it. Finance people, accounting people with that background. I don't know if it's because it's just where they're comfortable is, staying in numbers and staying in the financials, or if they don't realize the opportunity that they have to really take things to the next level. But I do see, folks sort of shrink away from the opportunity to like really press into the business and show up in places that, maybe they don't have any right to be, but there's an opportunity. And I think it's cool. Like folks always want a seat at the table. And when I hear people say like, I want a seat at the table, or they're not giving me the seat at the table, I think you have to like look at yourself and say like, well, first, are you adding value to these conversations? Because when you're adding value and you're killing the things that you're doing, people want you to be sitting at their table. And then when you get to the table, then you're like, I have the right to sort of get into anything I want. And you got to be respectful, of course. You don't want to just like, you're a finance person, by the way. You haven't sold software yet. But, when you can step into some of those areas, you can add a different perspective. And I think that's what's really valuable is when you can come with a different perspective, and then everybody can make better decisions. And I've been sort of lucky enough to get into those opportunities, quite a few times in my career.
Yeah, working in tech, I'm always like cautiously pushing the boundary of trying to get into the technical stuff because A, I find it interesting and like I just want to learn. But B, I figure like if I can crawl into the product and understand it a bit better, I can forecast like the reality within an Excel spreadsheet. But a lot of times I do start to go down a path where I'm like, do I belong over here? Is somebody going to call me out and be like, CJ, what the hell are you doing like over in this product stuff?
Oh, that's really cool. I love getting into the product as well. I'm probably not as deep as I always want to be either. But, it's cool when you have a really good product partner that wants to bring you in and doesn't mind when you're super deep in some of those conversations. That really helps.
And at first I was kind of shy to ask about it. Like they're going to be like, are you trying to, go clean up your own backyard. Why are you sniffing around over here? But what I found is if you come at it from like a perspective of I'm actually curious, I think what you do is cool. They actually open up and they're like, oh, you want to learn about what I work on day to day? Yeah, totally. I'll take you under my wing and show you. It's just kind of like the pretense you come in with. Like, I'm not here to ask so I can take away your budget. I'm here because like I think what we build is awesome and like you're the one building it. Yeah,
man, the way that you just said that I think is so cool. I think a lot of folks have an aversion to the finance team coming in, right? Because they probably had some bad budget experience. They had finance people that were just like, no, you can't do that. And so they're suspicious, or they can often be suspicious of what your intentions are. And so if you want to get in there to understand and grow the business and prioritize investment in the right things, like putting resources into the right areas of the product and maybe giving them more resources, like they don't always see that, and they may not always understand that perspective. So when you can build really good relationships and then prove that you're really there to learn and be curious, I think you're totally right. You can build a better business that way instead of just being like a no finance team.
Yeah, the CF no. You had brought up earlier Jocko, and one of the terms that he uses is extreme ownership. It sounds like you that resonates with you. You believe in it. Can you give like a real example of what extreme ownership means day to day?
Yeah, I really do love Jocko. I reference him all the time on these sorts of topics, and I've shared like that book with as many people as I can, Extreme Ownership. There's always opportunities for you to walk away and say that's somebody else's job. That's someone else's problem. The product isn't hunting, or we have too many Sev1 incidents, but they're taking care of it. It's fine. Or the team is not working well together, but I'm not really involved in those conversations. It's fine. Or the sales organization is not doing well, but I can't do anything about that. And I think that the extreme ownership really says, hey, this is our company. We're going to, or whatever problem that you have, as you're thinking about company, this is our company. I'm a big part of this. You're a big part of this. We need to step in this together. And so to the extent that you're having a problem, it's my problem too. And so I'm going to go address it with you. I'm going to hit it head on. I'm not going to be scared to bring up a conversation about interpersonal issues with the team. I'm going to go talk to, whoever the folks are across your organization where you're having trouble. I'm going to say the things that maybe others are a little bit hesitant to say. And it's hard. It's hard for folks, and you got to do it like every single day and every single interaction, and continue to build trust and be authentic around it. But it's owning those difficult problems that others might, shy away from.
We had spoken to John McCauley, the CFO of Calendly, and he was saying, hey, once you make it to the C-suite, you can no longer say like, oh, that team is bad or that team is missing the boat here. It's like, no, it's now your collective problem. Like, you have to own it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so right. You're, especially in that CFO role, you have a responsibility to a litany of people. Of course, your peers and the associates of the entire company and all of your investors. So it's like a new level of expectation and ownership. And I think the extreme ownership mentality, it fits really well with those that CFO role, because you owe it to everybody.
You brought up, like, I think you said Sev1 incidents. I, like, in my first year as CFO, I remember we had an outage and I was like, oh, that's the technical team's problem. Like, no, wait, hold on. This is my problem too. Like, this impacts revenue. This is like very much our problem collectively. Like, I have to understand what's going on here. And that was new to me because, like, once again, I'm not technical, but like I looked at it as like an issue, like, what can I do to help here? Yeah,
I mean, that's smart. I think that's a really great flip. And I've had the same flip in my career where you sort of realize, oh yeah, I got to be playing a part in this. And if anything, you got to forecast it. You got to make sure you're accounting for these things appropriately, and then thinking about capital allocation. Should we be allocating more capital into these spaces where we're having trouble, and then supporting the team however you can? So you're absolutely right. There's lots of ways besides maybe digging into the technical components where you might not be helpful there, but there's a lot of things to do around those sorts of issues.
Couldn't agree more. We had spoken to Adam Zawicki, CFO of Rippling, and he had said that there are tons of books written on strategy, but not many written on execution. And I heard that you'd said somewhere else that winning is 90% execution. Can you expand upon that?
I love the execution side. I love the strategy side, I think even more than the execution side. I mean, the strategy can really help change the direction of a company. You can get into things that maybe you hadn't been thinking about and use assets in a new way. But all of those great ideas that you might have, if you can't execute on it, then it doesn't matter how good your strategy is. And of course, that's been said 1,000 times, but I think it shows up every single day in our business and the way that we operate. The strategy has been fairly consistent for the last couple of years. We continue to press into, expanding and growing the organization and our reach. And if we stop executing, like, it all falls apart. So, I think like it takes just an intense amount of focus, and you got to continue to push the pace all the time. And you have to understand the strategy, be able to communicate it extremely well so that people know exactly what to do. And that's been a fun part, I think, of the CFO role that I've noted as well is more and more communication side of it to keep people aligned and executing on the right things.
That communication piece is so key. It's kind of like you got to tell them what you told them, and then you got to tell them again. And often as a CFO, you feel like a broken record. But I mean, that is a big component of the job.
Yeah, I remember it was probably like one of the first maybe couple months that I had started at Paycor, and they asked me to get on an all-employee call and talk about the performance. They think this was right after that CFO had quit. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got to talk in front of this whole company about, financial performance. And I sort of wrote my script up. I was so nervous about it. I've worked on it for a long time and, getting up in front of people. But you're absolutely right. You have to like really clarify your message. You have to be really consistent in how you talk about it. And it can't be, overly burdensome for folks to consume. It can't be finance laden. It has to resonate with people. And so converting strategy or financial performance into a communication that people can like actually receive and hear. I think it's like an ongoing thing. It constantly evolves, but you got to say it 1,000 times. You're right. You got to say the same thing 1,000 times. And then I think then it's usually when people are starting to get it.
Something else that you had said is that capacity for stress is something that you're pretty good at. Do you think that is innate skill or something that's learned over time?
I think it can be learned for sure. Well, I probably maybe grew up with a little too much stress personally, so maybe I have my own baggage that weighs me down. And then I went through the military and got beat up a little bit there, and so maybe there's some other reasons that I built this capacity for stress. But I think it sort of goes back to what you were saying earlier, where everybody gets scared of something or you're fearful of something, and you just have to keep going and drive action. And I think when you sort of run into those experiences enough, you start to realize like, oh, I'm actually not going to get crushed under this stress or this weight of whatever this is. I just need to keep stepping. And so you sort of have to learn the tools of because if you shrink back or you sort of get in your own head when you're under all that stress, oof, man, like that ends up being a really bad place.
We had spoken to Molly Graham, who is kind of a legendary Silicon Valley operator, and she wrote the canonical piece, like How to Give Up Your Legos. She had said there's this thing that you realize when you work with people who have been in the military before, that like when something really stressful happens at the company, like they're the calmest one in the room. And it's got to be something like they just know like that this isn't as real as like real could be.
It's totally true. I love the conversation with Molly. And I think it's spot on. Sometimes when you're around people that just aren't unfazed, I think that's often the feeling where they're like, look, this really isn't as big of a deal. And you need people above you that have had that carry that same weight. So sometimes when I'm getting like super stressed out on something, I'll talk to the CEO over like, hey, what about this? What about this? And he's like, it's not a big deal. And you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, and it really helps to have people that have sort of been through some of those dynamics before. A war definitely helps. I mean, when you're going through overseas deployment and you've been gone forever and you've seen like, just those dynamics, it's when you come back to a office job, there's the dynamics are different. Yeah. And not that I saw, live action, but plenty of friends who have gone through a lot, and it changes the way that you think about the stress of office job for sure.
Yeah. And stress and like the level of work you take on, like there's a lot written about it in the news these days. Do you think that the culture of like grinding and working hard is making a comeback?
I have heard some more things lately that gives me a little bit of hope. And I'm a little counterculture on this right now, but especially growing up, sort of like we probably both did. I'm in my early 40s, so maybe a little bit late as a millennial and not quite a Gen Xer. But I've grown up as you got to work hard. You don't always have to put your head down, but you have to work hard and you have to kill it. Like whatever you're working on, you have to kill it. A lot of folks, I think, or maybe not a lot, but there's been more of a rotation towards like, hey, like let's balance a lot of things out. And I'm just telling everybody, it's just too hard to balance in the way that folks want to balance. If you want to make it to the CFO role, if you want to run a company, I try to balance things into my life, but it's not an equal balance. And I think that I'm starting to see a rotation maybe back towards, hey, let's work hard, let's hustle a little bit, And that's what ends up showing up as success.
I'm kind of mad it's coming back because I've been hustling and grinding this whole time. And I was like, damn, there's less competition out here. I'm like, I can let everybody else go to the beach and get a couple more hours and do another podcast.
That's right. It's like a competitive advantage for you, right? But maybe it's going away a little bit as an advantage. I don't know. I'm sure that it'll suit you for a long time.
I'm not saying like Elon Musk is like a good guy or anything like that, but I thought like the SNL skit that he did, he makes this comment like, did you think that a person who wants to go to the moon and makes electric cars is like going to be this chill guy? And it really resonates. Like if you want to be like number one in the world in anything or top in your craft, like you're probably not going to be the most balanced person in life.
Yeah, I think that's like with anything. You're absolutely right. Like all the craft, like we would celebrate athletes who are putting everything into their profession to become the best, and they have to. There's just no way. Sports would be boring to watch if you were watching me play softball. Man, no one comes to those games, CJ. Nobody comes to my softball games.
I know. No one comes to my local 5K road races either. Oh, well. I'm going to take you into what we call our long ass lightning round. So you're a successful guy, but I ask everybody, what's an example of something you've screwed up on the job? It could be here or any job.
Yeah, plenty of examples. I'll just share one that I thought that resonates. When I was running M&A, I rolled off to run the line of business of this company that we just acquired and go through the integration. And I really wanted to be the line of business CFO at the time. I spent a lot of time inside of the financials, trying to do the forecasting, reporting, and I really neglected to build the right relationship with the CEO. I neglected to really understand the strategy across that executive team and what they were trying to accomplish. And they had to hire a new CFO to come in, and I ended up reporting to that person. But that was a big failure for me that I felt like it was a setback, but it wasn't. It really helped me to learn about how I needed to build better relationships and get into what was going on. But I failed for sure. I didn't build the right relationships. I missed on, thinking strategically about where the business was going. And I just got too caught up in the day-to-day finance pieces. So it was a big miss, but it really helped me to learn and grow and become better at that perspective.
Yeah. Because a lot of people would shy away from that and be like, this is BS. Like you're bringing someone in over me. But it sounds like you're like, all right, I'll learn from you, and then I'll step up again.
Well, I was pretty frustrated about it for at least a day. And I was like, what am I doing here? This is ridiculous. And then I actually flew back home and I spent some time with my wife, and I was like, okay, like I have an opportunity to learn. I'm going to go spend some time with it. And actually, she was amazing. The woman that I had worked with then for the next year, she was great and really taught me a lot.
Next one, can you walk me through your finance software stack? What tools do you use today to get the job done?
Yeah, we use NetSuite. We implemented NetSuite right before we took the company public. We use Adaptive as our planning tool. We use like G Treasury as one of our treasury tools. And we use, of course, Paycor for all of our payroll and HR related solutions. So nothing like crazy out of the norm. We also use like Zora for billing as well. Big Salesforce shop.
Last one. What's the craziest thing you've ever had someone try to expense?
Man, I knew you were going to ask this question. I was ready for this. Yeah, I don't know how wild it really is. It's not that wild, but we saw these requests for payment for flight lessons come through. And I was like, flight lessons? And the team, of course, catches this. I didn't catch this. The team catches this. And they're looking at these flight lessons. And there's like hundreds of hours of flight lesson payments that they had applied for. This sales rep was applying to pay for a flight for them and one of our customers to teach the customer, as a basically like a favor to get them to learn how to fly. And, fortunately the team found it and shut it all down. But I was like, man, how crazy is that they're just coming out on flight lessons here.
That's some next level T&E, man. Like that's taking travel into your own hands.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little gutsy. It was extremely gutsy. Yeah.
This has been awesome. Thanks for coming on and thanks for being generous with your time. I've learned a ton.
CJ, thanks so much. Yeah, I was really happy to be on and happy that you included me. So really appreciate it.
Run the Numbers is a mostly LLC production. Yelling an intro by Fat Joe. Artwork by some AI thingamajig. Podcast and video editing is done by Cleancast at cleancast.io. Nothing said on this podcast is intended to be business or investment advice. It's the sole opinion of me, a guy who feeds his dog too much ice cream and has a history of net operating losses, lol. If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And also check out mostlymetrics.com. That's my newsletter where I explore business models and financial metrics. Thanks for riding with me. Share this with your friends. Peace.